All right, man. For the first time in print, Dr. Newton reveals his step-by-step methods, his experiential approach to the spiritual realms, sheds light on the age-old questions: who are we, where we came from, and why are we here? This is Dr. Newton's first guidebook for both hypnosis professionals and the general public, revealing his methods of accessing the spiritual realms. He shows how to prepare yourself and the client for spiritual regression, open the mental gateway into the spirit world, return clients to their soul groups, identify soulmates, review past life incarnations, and safely complete the regression.
Dave, I'm back. I think we're all set to go, guys.
Okay.
Okay. Tell me right now.
Well, why don't you, hey, Frank, why don't you leave that door open for a minute? Just leave it open so we can talk to each other. Okay, anytime you're ready. When I get to the point of the book, I'm going to say, it's going to go to me, and then when I say the book Life Between Lives coming out in May, why don't you switch over to camera 3, and then a couple times when I say Dr. Newton, why don't you pop over to camera 2 and bring it back to me, and I'll finish it up. This is just an intro, Frank. No, we're going to go with Life Between Lives. We're going to go with me first, Life Between Lives, and then Dr. Newton. We're going to go to me, camera 3, camera 2, and then me. Anytime you're ready, let's tape. Is it recording? Good evening. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. We have a treat for you tonight. We have Dr. Newton with us tonight, Dr. Micheal Newton. And let me start that over again, Frank. Good evening. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. We have a treat for you tonight. We have Dr. Micheal Newton with us tonight. And the book here. The book Life Between Lives, coming out in May, completes the trilogy. Damn. Let me start this again, Frank. I'm sorry. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. We have a treat for you tonight. With us tonight is Dr. Micheal Newton. And the book Life Between Lives, coming out in May, completes the trilogy of best-selling books by Dr. Newton, including Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. We have learned from Pat. You're going to have to edit this in. No, I get it. Good evening. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. Tonight we have a treat for you. We have Dr. Micheal Newton with us, author of Destiny of Souls and Journey of Souls. The book Life Between Lives, coming out in May, completes the trilogy of best-selling books by Dr. Newton, including Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. We have learned from past Micheal Newton books what takes place in the spirit realms between lives, client studies. Today we are going to talk to the famed hypnotherapist about his groundbreaking methods of accessing those spiritual realms. For the first time, all right, hang on a second. For the first time in print, Dr. Newton reveals his step-by-step methods, his experiential approach to the spiritual realms, shed lights on the age-old question, who are we, where we came from, and why we are here. Boy, that sounds like hell. For the first time in print, Dr. Newton reveals his step-by-step methods, his experiential approach to the spirit realms, sheds light on the age-old questions, who are we, where do we come from, and why we are here. This is Dr. Newton's first guidebook for both, when I say, gee whiz. How about let's switch over to Doc at that time? Have we showed Dr. Newton yet? Let's get on with this interview, man. I'm gonna call him right now, Frank, and we'll just fuck this up however we can. What a fucking...
Thank you for shopping Dollar General. For English, welcome to MCI. For English, press 1.
In a rural area, it's easier for them just to have the books sent to their house. So I always tell the radio show folks that all your person has to do is dial 1-800-THE-MOON, and they can get it sent to their house. And I was thinking, with Montana, there must be a lot of people out there in the Tules where there's no bookstore in their town.
Yes.
Or so they could do it that way, or they could buy it through Amazon.com or whatever. And I just would appreciate that if you would announce it on the show that people can do that.
Well, not only are we going to announce it on the show, but
Hey, Dan, I'm gonna shut this door so everything's set to go.
okay.
So tell me right
Sounds good?
now.
Okay, we got our sound check. There's going to be graphics on the show that actually give the contact information for the website, and the website is www.spiritualregression or
That's it. Spiritualregression.org.
.org.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and those graphics will be on there, as well as contact information to get the book at. Now, the book is not coming out until May, correct?
That's the new book. I was thinking of my two existing books. And the new book is called Life Between Lives, Hypnotherapy.
Okay.
And the other two books, of course, Destiny and Journey of Souls, have been out for a few years, so there's no problem there.
Quite a few years, and I must tell you that you have quite a few readers in this area.
Well, that's good. The book has now been translated, the book's into about 25 languages.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's start rolling here. I'm going to introduce the show and introduce you, and then we'll get rolling.
Sounds good.
Okay. And you'll know the cue. You'll see it coming.
Okay.
Good evening. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. Tonight we have a special treat for you. We have Dr. Micheal Newton here, author of Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. And the book Life Between Lives, coming out in May, completes the trilogy of best-selling books by Dr. Newton. Welcome to the show, Dr. Newton.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave.
All right. So the book coming out right now, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, was a case study, pretty much case studies. The book coming out now, Life Between Lives, that's actually a book that gives the process of getting people to their past lives.
Right. It's a little different book, Dave. The first two books were based on thousands and thousands of clients that I worked with well over 30 years. And those cases were representative of what they had to say when I took them into deep hypnosis in their between-life state. Now, what happened was that as time grew closer for me to retire, and more people said, well, you can't just quit on us and not train people to do what you've been able to do. And so
And the book is intended to, is a guidebook intended to reach who?
Well, primarily it will help hypnotherapists work with life between life clients. But at the same time, people who are interested in the process will learn a great deal about the procedures that are used and what can be learned from using certain techniques, and more examples of case studies revealing information about various aspects of the spirit world. So I think it would be fair to say, Dave, that the lay public as well as professional hypnotherapists will enjoy this latest book. I hope so.
Is there an organization whose sole purpose is advancement of the hypnosis regression?
Yes, Dave, thank you for mentioning that.
Uh-huh.
Last year, well, actually it was in 2002, I founded the Society for Spiritual Regression. And the intention here was to not only have a training ground for hypnotherapists, in fact, an organization to which they could belong and communicate with each other, but also reach the public in terms of referrals. People from all over the country hoping to find someone that isn't too far distant from them who could take them into their spiritual life. So the society really has two roles. One, to serve as an organization for professional life between life hypnotherapists, and also for a place where the public can go for referrals and other information about what we've learned in terms of our afterlife experience.
So that's Society for Spiritual Regression, and you can actually reach them at www.spiritualregression.org.
That's right, Dave, and you can find out all that you need to know and how to get referrals and so forth. And I might mention, you and I have touched on this before, that we are having a training session in Los Angeles the first week of March. And
Yeah.
I would encourage anybody who is a hypnotherapist, especially someone who's worked with past life regression in the state of Montana, and who might be interested in learning the techniques of how to take people between their lives, that they consider attending this, because this is not always offered in the same city. Sometimes it's on the East Coast, sometimes in the Midwest. So the fact that it's on the West Coast, I think, is going to be something that will be of real benefit to local people. And I think that those folks in Montana could fly to Los Angeles, and if they were really interested in this, and be a part of this training program. It's a 4 or 5 day training program. And that too, all I got to do is dial into our website. I have a phone number too for them if they would like. I might as well give that out.
Yeah, what is that phone number?
Area code 508-743-9545. Now, the lady that whose phone that is, she's back in Plymouth, Massachusetts, near Boston, and she's the coordinator for that. So I think if you have anyone in your state that's interested, this would be an easy way for them to get training, and it's coming up rather quickly in another month or so.
And again, I checked in this area. There's nobody in Montana, and from what at the time I checked, there was nobody in Idaho. So anybody that wants to be spiritually regressed by an LBL practitioner has to go to one of those states. So I urge local hypnotherapists to check this out. And again, the phone number is 508-743-9545. Now, let me ask you this, Doctor. On the subject of hypnosis or hypnotherapy, there's several different practices. There's timeline, there's hypnotherapy, past life regression, life between lives therapy, to name a few. Can you define spiritual regression? Because that's actually pretty much a creation of your own, isn't it?
It is. That term was created by me, because what essentially it means, Dave, is that anytime you are engaging in hypnosis where you are regressed into your childhood, discover, say, some trauma that happened to you when you were a child that's bothering you today in a more traditional sense of psychotherapy, or you're taken back into a past life, or you're taken into your life between lives, it is regression. You are therapeutically, Dave, I cannot tell you how much this has helped people understand how they connect with their current body. Because what this means is that with each body we have a brain that our soul is attached to, and therefore we have a combination of temperament and personality that goes along with this original identity. So we have a unique person in every life, but a lot of people find that once they learn their true identity and how that is connected with their current body, they understand themselves to a much greater extent. And I think psychologically and therapeutically, that has been one of the major discoveries of working in this field. And you can cut through an awful lot of things quickly with a 3 to 4 hour session and learn a great deal about yourself. And this is what is so attractive for people. And the other thing is, of course, you learn who you are, why you are here, and where you come from. And these are major philosophical issues that have been around with us for thousands of years. So I look upon it as a great discovery, and it took me a long time to once I discovered that it was possible to do this kind of work, to learn what I've learned about it. It took many, many years, and that's why I wrote those books. So there's an awful lot to spiritual regression, Dave, but essentially that's where it comes from, the term.
And it seems like it seems so complicated. You say a 3 or 4 hour session, but isn't there more than one session involved?
Well, I'll tell you, what is interesting for me is that for many years I was the only person doing this.
Right.
And as a result of that, people would call from all over the world and want to come and see me, and I simply only had time to see people once. And so I had to do it all in 3 to 4 hours. Now, the most ideal way to do this, and the way I began and the way I train people today, is to have 2 or 3 sessions. If a person doesn't have to fly a long distance or is able to fly a long distance and stay a few days, my recommendation would be to have a 3-session meeting with the therapist. The first time you get to know each other and talk about the background and maybe some preliminary hypnosis. The second meeting could be a deeper state with perhaps going into a past life. And then the final stage could be strictly a life between life regression. So, yes, Dave, it's an important point that if someone could have 2 or 3 sessions, that would be very nice for them. But many people who travel a long distance, they can't do that. And so they have to do it all in one session.
And you also suggest in your book that first of all, that not just anybody should be trying to spiritually regress somebody.
My gosh, no.
It's the spiritual regression techniques that
it worries me. I must tell you, Dave, because if a person is working in basic hypnosis and what they're doing is, say, smoking and weight, which are very common, this is fine work, and it's very, very helpful to people because hypnosis is a powerful tool. But I don't think that those folks are really well trained enough psychologically and in some of the more esoteric aspects of deep hypnosis regarding, as I say, childhood trauma and past life regression.
Right.
To go into this kind of work, spiritual regression, I would encourage the hypnotherapist to look into that rather than the hypnotist, if you know what I mean.
Right. And as well, if somebody doesn't know how to take somebody like to the point where they can actually go to those places, isn't it kind of unsafe, especially if somebody isn't all the way under, so to speak? Then they kind of write their own story to it, and then a person comes away from the session having written their own story to it, and actually instead of getting the truth.
Well, the thing about it is, people have a self-protective mechanism that sometimes when they have, and this is true with basic psychology too, when you're working with a counselor or a psychiatrist or psychologist, that if someone is not doing something appropriately for whatever reason, people have a kind of built-in defensive mechanism, and very oftentimes, they can walk away from that and they just simply will say, well, I didn't get much out of that, I'm not going back. I don't think
Right,
And
right.
this is very important. For example, if you are having a terrible time trying to quit smoking, and you went to a hypnotist to help you with this,
Uh-huh.
and very oftentimes you can certainly be helped in this way, it's not necessary to take you very deep. Often those sessions last 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and you're in anywhere from a shallow to middle alpha state. But you see, for past life regression, you need to be at least, I think, an upper alpha to be deep enough in order to recover those memories. And certainly for life between life regression, I think you need to be even deeper in the theta state
Right.
to do this. So this takes time. You can't just plunk down in a therapist's office and think you're going to be out of there in an hour, because it takes time to get you deep, and it takes time to ask the proper questions that need to be asked in order to get the information that we're talking about here.
And theta is actually or is delta the deepest state of hypnosis?
Well, the way it is typically I explain it, Dave, is that the beta state, of course, is our full conscious wake state.
Uh-huh.
For many of us who meditate or have a way of kind of disengaging from our body when we're thinking about things and sort of tuning out the world, this is what we would call perhaps a shallow alpha state, maybe even a middle alpha state. If you're working, for example, as a traditional psychologist with hypnotherapy with children with forgotten or memories that were very traumatic, either emotionally or physically, that need to be dealt with for desensitization,
Uh-huh.
you're probably working in the middle alpha state. If you're doing past life work, you're probably in upper alpha. And then from there, you move to theta, which is still a state where clients can report back to the therapist. But once you go beyond that into deep sleep delta, then of course you're asleep. And this is
Oh, I see.
these various stages we've been talking about are what we go through every night when we go to sleep, and they're reversed in the morning when we wake up. So it's not just applied to hypnosis. These are very normal body functions that we engage in every time we fall asleep and when we wake up.
So let me ask you this: in the theta state, can a person, if they come back from the theta state, can they remember what took place during the session?
Well, first of all, Dave, that's a good question, because everyone I train has tape recorders.
Right.
In other words, everything is down on the tape recorder.
Right.
Now, the other thing is, yes, they can remember an awful lot, if not all of it, especially with post-hypnotic suggestion, that they will do so. However, these sessions are so detailed that people love to have their audio cassette tapes, because they get home and they play these, and they keep remembering more things, and it has every detail, of course, that happened during the session, and I encourage them to take journals, to begin using a journal in order to note the additional information that comes to them that often happens after they listen to their tapes. But the theta state is characterized by subjects that have more of a disassociation with the body than some of the more lighter stages. In fact, they have more of an increased linear time distortion. They're just really sort of in limbo, and this is what I call the superconscious state as opposed to the subconscious. So it is a marvelous tool for getting information about our afterlife experience.
And the afterlife actually dictates what is happening with us now, correct?
Well, the thing is, Dave, that when we die and go to the spirit world as souls, we have taken certain lessons with us, the reasons that we came into this life, the reasons why we chose our bodies, and all those things that go on with regard to karma, that go back to our beginnings, our very first life. And we meditate about them, and we discuss them with our masters in the spirit world. We talk about how we could have done better. What
there's 6 sections to your book, but before we get into that, I want to you suggest in your book that the text in the book is designed to present the foundation for a spiritual regressionist.
Yeah.
But it's not meant to conform to a rigid sequence of hypnosis procedures. Why would that be?
Well, the thing about that is, when I speak of rigidity, I'm not talking about the techniques that it would take, Dave, in order to get somebody into a proper state for a life between lives review.
Right.
There are definite techniques for that, and there is a sequencing that goes on. The thing I was pointing out with that statement was that although my books look like there is a great deal of sequencing in terms of when we cross over, who comes to meet us, where do we go first, what are the other station stops, and very oftentimes clients will explain about meeting their guides and then meeting their friends in their soul groups and then going to see a group of wise masters and the other things they do, and eventually at the very end, the place of life selection where they look and make a choice of their new body. But it's not. This is not so rigid that there isn't a great deal of flexibility, not only between lives, but between clients and the different lives that the different afterlives that they've had all throughout their history of the incarnation. So there's a lot of flexibility.
Right.
With every session, with every person, depending on their state of development.
Right. Is it a little bit intuitive on the regressionist part to actually get a person to these places?
There's a lot of intuitiveness,
Yeah.
and this is why we work so hard to get good therapists in
Sure.
our training programs, Dave. And it's a very good point that you make, because there are people that aren't suited for this kind of work.
Right.
It's hard work. You have to juggle a lot of balls for 3 to 4 hours, and I have to tell you that many times I was just emotionally drained, very physically tired after a session, and I would have to go out, take a hike, and clear my head, to do some exercise. And the thing I encourage people to understand who are thinking about going into this field is that you may have a very regulated practice where you see clients perhaps for an hour over the course of a day, and the kind of work we're talking about is very, very difficult to do every day. And a lot of the people that I train, maybe they have past life regression 1 or 2 times a week, and usually they don't schedule clients after they have one of these, because it is very demanding work.
And taxing, huh?
Yeah, it's tiring for both you and the client.
Yeah, psychically and physically, I imagine.
Yeah, in every way.
Right.
But the information that the client gets out of this is so awesome that you just can't usher them out of your office and say, well, it's nice working with you, goodbye. These people sit there in your office chair, and they're dumbfounded at what their mind has carried all these years and what has suddenly been brought out to them, and they need to process that information.
I can only imagine the look on a client's face when they get done with a session and they wake up or they come back and they look at you. I can't imagine the look
it's
on
so
their face.
gratifying.
I bet.
I just never got over the feeling of how much it meant to the people I was working with. And the thing is, Dave, I need to tell you that I began as a very traditional therapist. I was not a new age person. I had to be brought kicking and screaming into the metaphysical movement.
I know.
This was something many decades ago that I took too easily, and I think what I can say is that what brought me to the party was the tremendous consistency of the reports.
Right.
All these people who, regardless of their past belief system or their station in life or anything else, where they came from, once I had them in deep hypnosis, they pretty much all told me the same thing about their spiritual life. And this is what really hooked me.
Well, in studying and going through all your information, I did find out that you had to come kicking and screaming, which brings me to a couple of questions. First of all, I understand that you're going to be retiring and that this workshop in Los Angeles might be the last one that you're actually involved in with yourself. Is that
Oh,
correct?
I've retired from seeing clients.
Uh-huh.
And actually my training now has gotten to the point where I have 4 or 5 really good people ready to take over for me as far as training. So I will be conducting this with them in Los Angeles. But the time is coming when I'm going to begin to phase myself out. I'm in my 70s now, Dave, and it's very, very tiring work. And I don't like jumping on planes and traveling around the country anymore.
I bet it kind of wears you out. But I just have to comment on one thing. The picture we have, the pictures Heather sent of you. I hope I look good that well when I'm 73. By golly.
Well, those were flattering shots, Dave. I sometimes think it's like the picture of Dorian Gray. There are times when I really do look my age. But it is tiring, and there was a time when I used to give lectures all over in fact, throughout the world. I was overseas a lot, giving lectures and so forth. So now I have these wonderful people who I've trained, my best people, 4 or 5 of them, who are really taking over for me in that regard. Nancy's one of them, the lady whose phone number I gave you at the top of the show.
Uh-huh.
They're really good people, and they're very skilled at what they do, and they're younger, and they've got a lot of energy, and I think it's wonderful.
Another question I have is, I understand that you just recently you had a workshop in the Netherlands.
Yes, I wasn't at that. I had to do a workshop in London, but I had 2 of my people attend that in the Netherlands, and it was very interesting because it was the first international past life conference.
Wow.
I guess, and
Wow.
put on by Hans van Dam, who's written, I think, one or 2 really fine books that I've enjoyed. And I couldn't go because I had a commitment in London at the same time, so I sent 2 of my disciples, if I can use that word.
Sure.
And these 2 people went to the Netherlands to present Life Between Lives, which was not a part of the original show, but they just wowed them because these therapists came from all over the world to talk about past lives, which they did. But then when my people came on and told them there was something much more, they were really kind of enraptured by it, and they put my 2 folks put on a demonstration for them that just really, I think that it impressed them so much that I think there's going to be hopefully in the future an international conference on life between lives, so it'll be fun to watch this.
So I was under the impression that that you went under at the Netherlands. I must have read that incorrectly. Have you ever actually? Has anybody ever taken you under, Doctor?
Yes. I have to tell you this though, Dave.
Uh-huh.
I waited a long time for the
Did
right.
you?
You gotta understand that being the great guru here, I had to. I don't take myself very seriously. I take the work seriously, but I'm trying to be a little bit light here. But I wanted to find someone who had the kind of rapport and intuitiveness that works well with my personality.
Uh-huh.
And I needed time for that.
Right.
So I waited, and I watched the training, and I helped in all the training, of course, and did the training, a lot of the lecturing and so forth. And I found somebody who I felt I could really connect with. And so last year, finally, it was my turn.
Oh, last year, huh?
Last year, towards the end of late October. And I finally had my own session, and it was just so much fun to be on the other end for a change and have somebody working with me. I just have to tell you that I waited an awful long time for that.
Well, I don't, that opens the door for a whole bunch of questions, and I'm reluctant to approach those questions because
Better be reluctant, Dave, because people have said, "Well, I want you to tell us all about your session," and I won't do it.
Well, I thought if that was open information, then it would have been offered.
Oh no, she's of course sworn to confidentiality, as we all are whenever we work with a client. And there's a lot of things in there that I feel very humbled to learn about.
that's obvious.
And I will say this about, the past lives leading up to what I learned about myself in the spirit world, and some of the things were not revealed to me deliberately. I guess I wasn't supposed to know about them. But my past lives, a lot of them have been connected with working with people in a spiritual capacity. I haven't been a priest, but I have had a lot of lives where I've been wandering around the desert in kind of an old cloth robe and working with people in villages in Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago in terms of enlightenment. And so I've got a lot of those kinds of past lives. So that was kind of fun to hear about.
Oh, I bet. Okay, let's get into in part one, the initial inquiry. You speak of addressing a client's belief system.
Yes.
And why do you address their belief system?
Well, this is important because clients come from you from all different philosophical backgrounds. It's one of the things we talked about, Dave, when we mentioned this whole business of having a chance to maybe visit a time or two before your actual LBL session. Learning about a client's belief system may or may not be a key to how successful they're going to be, but certainly if somebody comes to you with very rigid beliefs about, let's say that you've got a very good Christian Catholic person perhaps coming to you who's concerned that reincarnation, which is not a part of the current Catholic Church,
Right.
not something they should be doing, but they want to do it anyway.
Right.
So you have to talk to them about this, and you have to explain, well, you've decided to come in any case, and why have you done this? And, well, we talk about that, and then I explain to them that in the early days of the church, before like about 325 AD, reincarnation was very much a part of the early church, and a lot of people don't know that, and they feel better for knowing it. I might get a Buddhist person who, the Buddhists, oddly enough, many people don't realize this, don't really believe in the soul. They think that we go from one existence to the next, and it's kind of like when we reach nirvana, there is an element of spirit, but they don't call it the soul. So I have to discuss that with them, and
Right.
we have to talk about that issue. So
Does it gain a measure of trust by going through that and sorting through all that with somebody?
I got to say this, Dave. There's an awful lot of people who come. Well, this is not an issue at all. They're interested in the process. They're interested in finding out about themselves. They don't have big philosophical issues. They have curiosity.
Right.
What you and I are talking about is that person whose own belief system maybe goes one way, and they feel that maybe metaphysics goes another way, and we need to discuss that and what spirituality means to them. So that's kind of what I mean about belief systems.
Well,
it may or may not be an issue with a client.
Does it seem to you, in just the initial interview, does it seem to you that like the age-old religions that are anchored in centuries of institutional dogma, is it seeming to not appeal more and more to people?
I have certainly seen that over 40 years of work. Yes, I have definitely seen it. To go back to when I began with the Bridie Murphy case in 1956. This shows you how old I am.
Wow.
This was a sensational case in the mid-50s of this ordinary housewife in Colorado who was put under by Maury Bernstein, a hypnotherapist in that area, and told about her life as an young Irish girl in Ireland, I think was in the previous century. And so, of course, there'd been past lives before that, but that case
not working for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not working for
So
them.
another thing, Dave, I have to tell you this: a lot of people don't want intermediaries standing between them and their spiritual enlightenment. They want to do it themselves. They want to have enlightenment direct, and they want to see their spiritual guides, their personal guides who have been assigned to them, and not be told that they're just angels floating around, indiscriminately, looking at everybody. They like the personalization that comes from learning this information
Sure.
through a process of deep hypnosis. Now, quite often people will say, "Is there no other way to get this?" And I am a hypnotherapist, so naturally, all my discoveries have been in this area. But there are a lot of other disciplines, with channeling and with working with psychics and mediums and
Remote viewing, maybe.
there's all sorts of ways.
Sure.
Deep meditation. I am, of course, very biased towards hypnosis because we can learn so much so quickly.
I think that hypnosis and actually your form of hypnosis, spiritual regression, is actually the wave of the future. One of the true ways that is actually going to elevate our race structure.
I hope so, David, mainly because I'm so involved with it and I know how valid it is. And people say, well, come on, can't people make up stories in hypnosis? What's the validity here? And you can't look upon it as a science. I mean, there are people who are afraid of hypnosis.
Sure.
But the thing is, you're talking about scientific proof or rules of evidence really depends on your willingness to accept or reject self-reports as data. And people in hypnosis are not dreaming or hallucinating because we don't dream or hallucinate in chronological sequence.
Right.
And so people report what they see as literal observations. In other words, it's a knowing with them. It's not just a feeling. And they can't deliberately lie in hypnosis. It's kind of like a truth serum.
Right. The reality comes out.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they may misinterpret something, David, but
they will be handed the truth.
They can't relate to anything that they don't believe is true.
Right.
So that's the thing. And of course, in my case, with all the consistencies that I've had, I'm naturally very, very convinced about the process.
Thousands of cases, correct?
Yes. Over
Okay.
many, many years.
Part one was about initial inquiry. Part two is about the actual spiritual regression. Now, do you find, in getting back to the spiritual regressionist and teaching them, is it an easy step for, say, a past life therapist to go from past life therapy to spiritual regression? Is that an easy step for them?
Let's put it this way, David.
Uh-huh.
It's easier if
Right.
you have had past life experience
Right.
than it is if you have not. For people who have had hypnosis training but have never done past lives are going to have to work harder. They just need to learn more. And if you've had very little hypnosis, then we won't accept you as a student because very simply you just simply don't have the background yet for this kind of work. Once in a while, we'll get a request from somebody who's had basic hypnosis. They haven't even had advanced primary hypnosis.
Right.
And they'll say, well, I'm ready to jump into this. Well, they're really not. They need to have a lot more technical training and experience.
Well, I appreciate the fact that it's like raising pit bull puppies, I guess. You watch where the puppies go so that it doesn't get misused and mishandled, and I appreciate that about your process.
Well, I'm very much of a stickler for this, and everybody who I work with knows this. I'm not going to have my baby contaminated by people who are not really, very good. So I work very hard, and the people that work with me work very hard to try to
Keep it clean.
and get, request certain things with applications. And it's funny, David, and this is probably not going to come as a surprise to you. We can get some people who are very highly trained with excellent academic backgrounds, and somehow it just doesn't click with them. They just don't seem to be able to handle it well. And we get others who are maybe a little marginal or on the line
imagine by actually going under, spiritual regressionist would know how to better get somebody else to that point.
I think you're right,
Yeah.
David. We have found this to be true. People
Yeah.
have written us after they've been through this training, and they've told us that the training and the experience that came from that has made them much better hypnotherapists.
Right.
That's absolutely true.
And there's and I'm a firm believer when it comes to spiritual matters. There's a difference between, and there's a great wide gap between the intellect and intuition.
That's very, very true. We can get some awfully bright people who seem to kind of miss the point. They don't have that intuitiveness about
Right.
them that they need. And by the same token, we can get some very intuitive people who just need to have more of an academic background and more experience. So, it can work both ways.
I thought it very enlightening when I was going through your stages of hypnosis, and I call it stages of hypnosis, and I'm not sure if that's the correct
Oh,
term.
that's fine, sure.
But you actually take somebody back through this life to actually being in their mother's womb, and then you
Right.
take them from that point to the most recent past life, and then you have them experience their passing in that life, and
Right. And what's strange, David?
What's
I
that?
didn't realize this was going to happen, but my first two books described all of the things people would learn and so forth about this, but it wasn't until I started, my manuscript now is not in book form yet. It won't be out till May, but there have been a lot of professionals who have read it, and including the head of my publishing company, who suddenly decided after he read this book that he was going to have a life between life regression.
really.
And I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, what is all this about? And I was told it's because now we understand the process better,
Right.
and we're more convinced this is going to work well for us.
See the whole
And
picture.
So, yeah, what we do, David, is we take people down to their childhood first, in the sense of familiarizing themselves with looking at things that they saw as a child, and recalling that memory in detail, and reporting back to us. And so I developed this technique of working at various ages, at 12, and at 7, and at 3, and then taking the client into the womb, and giving us information about that, and then moving them into a past life, and then, of course, moving them on. I'm not so sure, I don't think this is true, David, but I don't think a lot of people who have practiced past life regression only were ever involved in the process we've just talked about.
I've talked to several hypnotherapists and past life regressionists, and I that's the first time I've dealt with that process, and actually taking somebody through the womb, and the things you talked about, the places you take people to in that process, that the actual being in the womb, and that would be when they first enter the body.
Well, you see, this is what's so interesting about doing regression in this way. This is the first glimpse you have of them, David, as a soul.
Right.
Because naturally they have joined their mother's fetus in a period of time, generally between, I would say on an average, between the 4th and the 6th month. And then the soul is in place. And then the soul begins working with the brain. And it's fascinating to talk to people about their immortal soul working with their current brain, their current body, and what they found that was different from previous bodies, and how this particular brain will have to be dealt with.
Sure.
Is this a passive or aggressive type body? How are you as a soul going to adapt to this? And I mean, I'm simplifying something that's very complicated.
Oh, I know, because you have actually the mother is considered in all this as well, not just the physical brain.
Mother has a great deal in her own brain waves and her vibrational levels and her own soul and that of her child. There's a tremendous connection there.
Yeah.
So it's very instructive for both the facilitator and the client to learn about these things.
Sure.
Before we get into the real meat and potatoes of taking them into the spirit world.
Right, and the ways to actually ease them into that information. Is you can't just come out. I'm sure you can't just come out and ask a question. Well, tell me about your soul entering your body.
And that's why you have to choose the right kind of person to be a facilitator.
Sure.
You cannot have an impatient person here.
No, I know.
This takes hours of time. And it's actually, you owe this to your client. I'm getting on my soapbox here, you can tell, Dave.
Well, you can jump on that anytime you want.
But, you know, this is a sacred trust that your client has given you.
Uh-huh.
And I always caution everybody, I don't care how much experience you have, to proceed slowly and carefully and make sure that this person is with you every step of the way.
Right, and no absence. Let me ask you one. I'm going to ask this question because of something you said. It might be a little off track, but we'll get back on track here in a second. You said that the soul comes into the body. In your experience, it comes into the body between the 4th and the 6th month. Have you found,
on average, yeah.
On the average, have you found out through taking regressing people, has the information come to you at what point that baby is actually considered human? I mean, is it from the...
See, this gets into a very ticklish subject of the pro-life people and the pro-choice people, and I try to, stay out of that because really it's not a part of what I do. I'm not espousing any particular, political or social agenda.
Sure.
I simply report on my findings, and all I can say is that what I've been told is, and I've been told this by all my information comes from my clients, and they've all told me pretty much the same thing, that there isn't enough for the brain to work. There's not enough gray matter, if you will. The brain is not developed enough for souls to work with before the 4th month. It's not that occasionally you might not have a soul join a little sooner, but they can't do much work. It's not until that brain develops to a certain stage that souls really can begin to work with a brain that's going to be with them throughout this current physical lifetime. Now, as long as we're on the subject of joining, I have to tell you, I've had clients that have been latecomers. I mean, I was shocked when I first learned about this many years ago that there are people who wait around. There are souls who don't join until the 9th month.
Really?
They're, and other souls will call them lazy. In other words, they'd rather be out, flitting around, playing. They don't want to do their work. And so, it's not all a cookie-cutter situation. There are souls who join rather late in the process. So they want that brain really developed when they join. So no two people are exactly the same, and it's fascinating to see the differences between people and how they treat the fetus. But they always are very deferential and careful, and I know at lectures, David, I've been asked this question, well, doesn't the child think of this as an alien being that's connecting with them when they're first aware of a soul coming into their brain? Say if we're dealing with perhaps a child that's maybe 6 months old or older. And my answer to that, and I've asked that question many, many times, is pretty much the same, always the same. And what it is no, they look upon us as a friend, as a companion, to join with them. In other words, it's almost as if it's a part of themselves. And they were, a number of clients will say, it seems like they were waiting for us. Now, once in a great while, you'll have a child that will kind of react in a more resistive way, but the souls are so gentle in the way that they join the brain. It's a very, very
subtle
process.
Yeah.
And it's far too esoteric for me to ever fully understand it. I report on it, but I don't understand it completely. I've explained what my clients have told me about how they connect with the neurotransmitters and the synapses, and they begin to trace the various parts of the brain with their own electrical energy to see, how they might fit in. And it's a very, complex kind of a thing. But
creation is complex.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I'm not playing God here. I don't really, there's an awful lot I don't understand.
Right, you're reporting case study, though. That's very important, I believe. Can I ask you this? Have you got any information on the soul doesn't, as a rule, doesn't enter the body until 4 months, but does the soul know upon conception? Do you know, does the soul know? Is it waiting on the other side for that conception?
Here's the thing, Dave.
Sure.
I have chapters on what I call the life selection room, life selection area.
Uh-huh.
And see, we're not sandbagged. We're not thrown into human bodies that we know nothing about and have no choice, no free will. This was really enlightening for me to learn this. But as a matter of fact, the people, the masters that we work with between lives, want us to be happy with the bodies that we've joined. And so they will present us often with choices, and we will go into this area and look at these various bodies. And in some lives there are more choices than in others. And we will actually seek, it's almost like watching a videotape of the future a little bit in terms of various aspects of this particular body's life to come and what they might expect, probabilities, and nothing is, as I say, set in stone because we have free will when
Sure.
we come into this. A body isn't going to do anything a specific way just because we happen to look at it in advance.
Uh-huh.
A lot of depends on how we are going to conduct ourselves in that body.
So let me ask you this. So in essence, we're like, say my soul wasn't the only soul looking at my body. There's soul shopping.
I don't know this for sure, but it seems to me that usually there's a leading candidate and we choose that body. Now, it seems to me, if that is true,
Uh-huh.
that we're the ones that are given the first shot at the body that we have and no one else was offered that body.
Wow.
That's not always true, but it is.
Right.
I think a lot of the times that when we look at 2 or 3 bodies, it's very evident with our guides and people who are helping us with this. There's one body that's been chosen for us that they think will be really an excellent choice. They don't force us to make it. There are easy lives, there are hard lives, there are lives in between. That's up to us. But more often than not, we choose the body that they feel is going to work best for us. And so we are very aware of this while we're waiting for that child to get to the point where we can join him.
Okay, part 3 is the beginning of the life between life hypnosis session, and we actually just talked about a lot of that. Part 4 is the mental gateway into the spirit world, and do you have to get somebody's when they're under? Do you have to get them to a point where they get to that? Is it actual gateway?
Well, I call it a gateway because it's kind of like you leave Earth's astral plane, and then all of a sudden you begin to enter through a portal, if I could call it that, an area that is your spiritual life. And sometimes people see it as sort of a tunnel, and I think this is what the NDEs see when they have a near-death experience. And then other times you just seem to pass right into the light. And I think that it's important for people who are undergoing this process to be taken very slowly through the gate.
Right.
And when they meet their friends and their guides, I want this to be very carefully conducted so they can enjoy, each step of this experience and to savor it. So that's why I stress, facilitators moving very slowly.
It seems like this is the point where, because I imagine a person that is a client experiences trauma or visualizations that are unfamiliar to them,
It's like going into a movie and you don't know the plot, and you sit down and the projectionist starts the film, and in the beginning it's slow because you're learning about the various scenes and the plot of the story and the major characters of the story. And as you begin to watch the movie more and more, it's almost as if it seems to speed up, and this is the way it is for clients. And as I say, it's annoying, and what they're doing is reviewing their own script, their own movie that's inside of every person's head. It's in there. And once they begin to see this movie, it's kind of oh yeah, I remember this.
familiar, huh?
And then, it all comes back to them, and they start telling you about all these things, and so it's very exciting for them.
I bet. And it would seem very touchy to get somebody to that point right there, to experience those things and get them all leveled out there, because part 5, the life between lives, is actually the meat of the substance of the whole regression. Am I correct?
It is. It's where we go when we have orientation, where we meet with a council of very wise beings.
have been a warrior in several lives.
I can believe that. I have too, I think.
Time out. So, and there's you meet your soul groups and your soulmates. Can you you know, how many times do you hear somebody say, "I think I've met my soulmate"?
Well, this is because I'm a romantic.
Sure, go into that for me.
I'm very, very fascinated with soulmates. Now, I have a tendency to call everybody in your spirit group a soulmate when essentially they're basically soul companions. We have one primary soulmate, someone with whom we've incarnated with through thousands of years of lives. And
Really?
we're so intimately connected with them that when we don't meet them in a life, and there are reasons for this, that we seemed a little bit lost. And you'll hear people say, why can't I seem to find my true love? Or maybe it was your first boyfriend or girlfriend in high school, and then you've moved on and they've moved on, and there was karmic purpose behind that. But you have learned a great deal from the person that you're with. And you can imagine when people are in deep hypnosis and they can identify all these people in their spirit group with people that they know today, because we incarnate often. Our companions incarnate into our lives and we in theirs because we're working together. So it's sort of like a theater company, and all the players take different roles in different productions. So
For a specific intent, though.
specific intent, yeah. But if you're with your soulmate, I'm blessed in this life to be with my soulmate. We've been married almost 50 years. But see, I think I was given a bye, David, because I've done all this important work. So they let me spend this life with her. And she's been a tremendous help to me. But everybody has a different experience, and you can learn a great deal from a companion who is perhaps your primary soulmate. So it's just interesting, and people are very fascinated with this aspect of their sessions.
What do let me ask you this? What do soul colors mean?
Well, soul colors generally are the vibrational levels of the energy that your clients are looking at, their energy, and they can see themselves and the energy of other souls. And
Is that is that in this existence in the physical realm, or is that
no, David, and a lot of
Okay.
people confuse this with
Right.
physical auras, and,
Right.
and it's totally different. When we're dealing with spiritual auras, we're dealing with colors that are projected as a result of the vibrational rate and the development of that soul. And believe me, I didn't understand this at all in the beginning. I had to learn through lots and lots of cases exactly what the color purple meant, what the color, yellow meant. And, and even today, it isn't always that clear with a blending of colors. But essentially what colors tell you is a little bit about the character of the soul.
Are the colors the same on the other side? Are they the same colors on the other side as they are here? I've been told that cosmic colors
Yeah, and
are
the thing is
different.
this, we're absolutely talking from a physical body. So if someone says, well, I appear to be yellow gold, they're going to use that term. I mean, maybe it isn't exactly that, but
Sure.
that's the way they describe it, because those are the colors that we see in the human body. And by the same token, when they talk about going to temples or to classrooms, they're basically talking about the function of those areas. In other words, they call it a classroom when they're in with a group of people where they're studying something, because they know about classrooms on Earth. This is the knowing that they have from their physical body, and so they're describing it in those earthly terms. I mean, if you were a being from a planet that was all ocean and you lived in seaweed, I'm sure you'd talk about places that look like they were formed of seaweed in the spirit world. It's all based upon our physical experience as to how we describe these settings.
Right.
And so what you have to look at is the function of what's going on.
Okay. So another point I want to make about an experienced LBL regressionist, and it seems through reading this book that you've set up through experience a specific line of questioning to achieve or to move somebody into a specific state or specific place in the regression, and it's different every time, is it not?
Well, there are some questions that you will ask of everybody, and there are other questions that you will have to use your intuition to
there specific are there specific times during the regression that are best for therapeutic moves at those times?
Well, I feel there are a number of places where therapy can be extremely helpful, and one of them is when we're in front of our counsel. Now, this is not, you remember that strange movie, Defending Your Life, with Meryl Streep and I think Albert Brooks? They were hauled before these judges in black robes and told to describe their life and defend their life, and if you failed the test, you were sent back. That was the punishment. This is Hollywood at its best.
At its best.
Nothing like that. I mean, when you're in front of these counsel, these benevolent beings, they're counselors. They're asking things like, "Oh, you're back with us again. We're so happy to see you. And how do you think you did in your past life?" And these sorts of things. So this, to me, is in a session when we're in front of these beings and they're talking to us about how they can help us in the future. To me, this is a time of great opportunity for therapy. To describe where they are in their current life, because of course it's all now time. So this means that we can take advantage, even though it's we're talking about a life between lives and after a former life. That once you're in the spirit world, there's no linear time, and we can easily project that into current time. How do they feel you're doing in your current body? And this is something that's really shocking to new therapists. They say, "My God, can you do this?" And you certainly can, and you can get wonderful answers. So that's kind of what I meant when I discussed in this new book we're talking about with regard to real opportunities for therapy. And the interesting thing about it all is you can, in a relatively short time, that is one major session, you can learn so much.
Right, and be able to carry it with you as well. Because doesn't it at that point? Have you noticed that at that point of learning, and they leave, and they go through the exit interview and what have you, and then they leave? Do you think that's a part of their vibration after that?
Well, you watch them leave, and they give you a big hug, and you hope that you've done the best job you can with them, and then I get these wonderful phone calls and letters later about how this has changed their life, and they're looking at life differently, and they now understand more about who they are and why they're here. And this is what makes all that hard work worthwhile, David. It really does.
So it isn't just to go under to learn about yourself. It isn't just to go under to regress, to learn about your past lives. There's actually a source or even a process of personal evolution in there, is there not?
Absolutely, and that's a very good point. You
Yeah.
see yourself in the cosmic connection.
Right.
As a part of an evolutionary being, growing, changing, developing. And this is a magnificent thing to learn about yourself. That you're in the middle of a process, that what you do today or tomorrow in the big picture, everything's important, but that we take ourselves so seriously in life. And we should to a certain extent, but I think the best way I can describe this, David, is we come out of a session like this with a much broader perspective about ourselves and people around us.
It's more than what we see. It's more than what we can reach out and touch. It's more than what we can smell, than what our five senses experience every day.
Well said.
And what seems to be the ultimate goal of all souls, Doctor? Have you got a grasp on that?
Well, I'd like to play God again. It's sometimes difficult in my exalted position. But the fact is that what I see over a period of all this evolution that goes on and all of the history that we've had as a race, we are getting better. We have more of a conscience about things. I mean, I've been at lectures when people have said to me, "Oh, don't you think we're going to hell in a handbasket?" And I remind them as a historian, look, things are very different in 2000 than they were in 1900. Take that 100 years and all the terrible wars that we've been through and the tragedies. And today, we are, I know it may seem like we're still in a big mess, but we, as a civilization, I firmly believe, have more of a conscience about those less powerful than ourselves and about their lives. And, in 1900, I mean, the world was full of autocrats and, kings who were
because
it's slow, to be sure, and we slide back every so often. But I think we're basically, as a civilization, we are moving forward, yes.
do you think it may be because there are those that that are seeking something outside of the body, that are seeking that information
I
outside
do,
of the body?
and I've been asked this question, David. Why do you think you were able to discover the things that you were able to do in the last 25 years? How come what you're doing, meaning me,
Right.
wasn't discovered a century ago or maybe 500 years ago? And I don't really have the answer to that, except to say that I think it centers around the fact that we are becoming a more evolved people, but we're now in a situation that has never existed before. We have two factors that are very troubling.
What's
One,
that?
we have a huge overpopulated society in so many parts of the world. We're like rats in a maze. Many people have identity problems because we're simply, there's too many of us. Now, what I also think is an important consideration, and it relates to the first issue, is that never before in human history have drugs been so pervasive. I mean, we've had alcohol throughout thousands of years and so forth.
Sure.
But today, when elementary school children have a great variety of drugs from which to choose from so that, quote, they can escape from reality, we're in a serious problem here.
We have the ability to destruct ourselves like no other time in history of the planet.
Absolutely. And,
Right.
of course, where I'm coming from with this, what happens is we subvert the soul. The soul can't do its work when it's enmeshed with a brain that's so zonked out on drugs that it's non-functioning.
Does the light through drugs and through these activities that diminish a person, does it actually diminish the light to the soul to do these things?
It does diminish them.
Right.
The soul cannot function in a brain that's been clouded by drugs. I know that there are people who are shamanic healers that go to Peru and say, well, we take these hallucinogenic plants and it gives us more awareness and so forth. That's not really the kind of thing I'm talking about, although I'm not a proponent of drugs of any kind.
You're not advocating that.
I'm talking about the kids on the street that are getting, cocaine and meth and all these other drugs simply to get on a high or to tune out from reality. And this is what I mean about inhibiting the work of the soul. And they do this on a daily basis. And, to me, we have never had this before in our civilization. And I think that is one of the reasons that the door is open to be able to see more into our spiritual life to help combat this. I don't know if that's true, but I sense that it could be true.
So it actually does diminish the light to the soul.
Yes?
Okay, let me ask you this, a question that came to me earlier, and I'm just getting back around to it. When we're all a part of a council on the other side in your findings. Now, when, and I'm sure the soul groups aren't all together at the same time. And from what I understand in your findings, that there's a part of the soul that's there, but while somebody is incarnated here, there's only a fraction of their soul that is a part of the group.
Depends on the particular life. You might leave 10% behind, you might leave 50% behind.
Really?
Depends on your development and what it is you want to achieve in life. So in a sense, we're always working up there.
Okay, this was my question. Now, if the whole soul isn't up there and there's different parts of the groups that have passed and they're in the middle of a life between lives, are the souls on the other side that are in the middle of life between lives, are they able to view the lives of the remaining
Sure.
people still on Earth? So they actually review that they can act. They're actually, is that what we call our guides here?
Well, this is the thing. We were talking about our soul companions here. Our guides are our teachers. They're the ones that are watching over us. But I often am asked this question, well, listen, if my mother died 30 years before and my time comes and I die, does this mean I'm not going to see her because she's moved on to another life?
Right.
And soul division is something that I've learned through my work. And the fact is, because of soul division, the dividing of energy, you absolutely will see your mother because a portion of her still remains in the spirit world. So it's an ongoing process. And, it's like a revolving door. People coming, people going, but there's always an anchor there.
Let me ask you this: in going through taking people through past lives. Have you experienced anything, in the process of evolution? And so far, from my understanding, there's, as a soul being, we start as a monad, and then in the process of evolution, we come as, it may start as a moss on a rock next to a river, and then you become animals and trees as.
That goes to transmigration, and this is belief of the Eastern people, people who live in the East, especially Hindus and so forth. And I can only tell you my own experience, David, is I've never found a soul who lived as an animal.
Really?
I think they're classifications of souls. I think they're dolphin souls, and they're cat souls, and they're horse souls, and whatever it is, they are in a certain group or classification for which they're suited as far as the physical being that they are occupying.
But a soul can't, like a soul of a deer can't, say, advance to be the soul of a.
I've never found any case to support that. Now, there are a lot of people who go back to belief systems. When we first began the show, we talked about that, who believe that very strongly and are shocked to find
that it doesn't come up.
That it doesn't come up, and they don't see it. And I have never had a client that has agreed with transmigration. So that's the only way I can explain it, David.
The questions have been asked when you've had somebody under there?
Well, think I've been asked every question imaginable. By the way, David, I'm going to have to leave you pretty soon.
Okay, I do want to plug a few more things, and that's the Society for Spiritual Regression. And I want to plug your conference in Los Angeles, and that starts on March 4th through March 7th.
Thank you very much, David. That's true, and we'll be at the Sportsman's Lodge Hotel there, right in Studio City. If people know Los Angeles at all, it's a very nice area. They can fly into Burbank Airport, by the way. They don't need to fly into LAX. So that makes it a little nice. And I just encourage anybody out there listening to your show who's especially a hypnotherapist that has done past life regression to think about this, because I think it will really enrich your practice. And I hope, too, that it will encourage a lot of listeners to your show to undergo life between life regression themselves.
I'm sure if there was a life between life regressionist here, I'm quite sure that people in this area. This is quite a metaphysical area here.
You told me that, Nick,
yeah.
and I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And so the contact number for that conference is 508-743-9545. The website is www.spiritualregression.org. And if you want to order Dr. Newton's new book, the phone number for that is 1-800-THE-MOON.
Right.
1-800-THE-MOON.
And that won't be available till May, but they can certainly order my other books, in the meantime, and get started if they haven't, read them before. So, listen, David, I do appreciate you having me on your show. It's been a very interesting hour and 15 minutes with you. And
it's been that long.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Newton, and I'll call you or I'll email you and let you know the response to the show.
Well, thanks so much, David. Good luck to you.
Yes, you as well. Good evening.
Bye-bye now.
All right. I want to read something.
Make a call.
I want to read something out of his book, and I don't like to quote somebody out of their book, but it says, current truths are succeeded by higher truths in each generation, and it is this progression of knowledge and acute awareness of ourselves which is at the core of expressing our personal identity. As spiritual regressionists utilizing the power of hypnosis, we are now blessed with a new medium of therapeutic intervention. If you are able to assist people in seeing the light of divinity within themselves and foster self-discovery, then you will have made a real contribution toward the ultimate enlightenment of our race. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening, and I'm going to give you the contact numbers one more time for the conference in Los Angeles. The contact number for that is 508-743-9545. The website is www.spiritualregression.org, and to order the book from Llewellyn Publishing Company, It's 1-800-THE-MOON. 1-800-THE-MOON. This is David Maines. Thank you for being with us one more week. Good night. All right. How's the sound, Frank? Does it sound all right? You might have to turn it down a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. The book Life Between Lives, coming out in May, completes a trilogy of best-selling books by Dr. Newton, including Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. We have learned from past Michael Newton books what takes place in the spirit realms between lives, client case studies. Huh? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. We have a treat for you this evening. We have Michael Newton here. No, actually, it's same spot, buddy. Okay. The book Life Between Lives, coming out in May, completes the trilogy of best-selling books by Dr. Newton, including Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. For the first time in print, are we rolling or what? All right, I'm going to start all over. Good evening. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. Tonight we have a special guest. We have Michael Newton in here to talk about his new book, Life Between Lives. The book, Life Between Lives, coming out in May, completes the trilogy of best-selling books by Dr. Newton, including Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. We have learned from past Michael Newton books what takes place in the spirit realms, between lives, client case studies, and more. Today we are going to talk to the famed hypnotherapist about his groundbreaking methods of accessing those spiritual realms. For the first time in print, Dr. Newton reveals his step-by-step methods, his experiential approach to the spirit realms. He sheds light on the age-old questions of who we are, where we came from, and why we are here. This is Dr. Newton's first guidebook for both hypnosis professionals and the general public, revealing his methods of accessing the spiritual realms. He shows how to prepare yourself and the client for spiritual regression, open the mental gateway into the spirit world, return clients to their soul groups, identify soulmates, review past life incarnations, and safely complete the regression. Okay. Yeah, for that. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to intro this and we'll get rolling here, Joel.
All right.
Good evening. Welcome to Metaphysical Concepts. I'm David Maines. This evening we have Joel Skousen with us again. Last week we talked about the state of the world, media disinformation, and gave you his website. And this week we're going to talk about what to do as individuals in these times and the times coming up, and what to do. Joel's does consultation on safety houses. And good evening, Joel.
Good evening, David. Nice to be with you again.
Yes, sir. What can we do as individuals in these times?
Well, a lot of that depends on an analysis, as we talked about last week, of what the threats are that we're going to face. If I can review those a little bit.
Sure.
Essentially, we have 2 or 3 major threats, what I call strategic threats, to deal with. The first, of course, and the most dangerous, ultimately, is the threat of war.
Sure.
Because of continual U.S. intervention Spokane, Washington, which is a major target of Fairchild Air Force Base. Those are the major ones that you'll have to contend with in terms of heavy fallout east of Great Falls and lighter fallout, but perhaps as long as 2 to 3 weeks of fallout from various parts west that come there. And there will be the accompanying social unrest if you live in major cities, because essentially America becomes a third world country again after this preemptive strike.
So, you know, if people here in Montana think that we're kind of we're immune to a lot of things because you know Montana's kind of separate. You know, it's kind of separated from a lot of things. So the reality of it is, if we don't get hit directly, we're going to be in the middle of a bunch of fallout. What as individuals do we do about this?
Well, you know, fallout will depend on, first of all, you know, there is no doubt that Montana will be hit. You have a major missile center with Minuteman III missiles in the middle of Montana, and it's going to get struck. So downwind of that, although, you know, there are a lot of rural areas, downwind of that, you really need to, I think, first of all, anybody who lives close to the missile bases or within 15 or 20 miles of those needs to move. I wouldn't wait for this to happen if you had a choice, because the Russians will use deep penetration weapons to root out the silos, and because of that, there'll be a tremendous amount of fallout. Fallout is much lighter when it comes a longer distance away from the Seattle area, for example, but it could potentially blanket with sufficient fallout to cause significant illness and some death, maybe on the western side of Montana, but significant illness otherwise. Well, the basic way that people protect themselves against fallout is to build a fallout shelter. And I realize that this requires some expense. It's much easier to do if you have a basement where you can build an overhead out of concrete block and metal corrugated panels. These building-type panels that they use to hold up cement for cement pours under porches and other things, those can be put with various beams and post-construction on 6-foot centers, a foot down from your basement ceiling, and you can stack blocks, concrete blocks up above there. You need to fill those concrete blocks with cement first so that they have full protection, and then you simply stack them on this false ceiling that you put up in a room, preferably a room that has water in it. And then you want to close off that room and provide some kind of a ventilation system run by 12-volt batteries. The golf cart variety that you could store right within the room. You need some type of 12-volt electrical system. So with a sealed-off room with external ventilation with a filter on it, and there are filters that are suitable. They're not technically nuclear filters, but you really only need a HEPA filter if you're not in a blast zone. And so you can buy even at Sears or other areas some of these Honeywell HEPA-type filters and put them on the outside of the room and draw in filtered air into a makeshift shelter. So it's very doable. That which I've just described probably can be done for less than $1,000. And one should have a lot of their food storage supplies down in that basement room as well.
And you know that's preparation that takes a little bit of time. When the time comes up on us, we're not going to have time to go get block and get concrete and get these things. So it's something that has to be worked towards, and something that has to be planned on.
You know, that's a very good point, David. You know, these things, to many people, are just outside their realm of comprehension. People have learned to trust government. You cannot trust government anymore. That's my assessment as the editor of World Affairs Brief. The government is under the gun right now for lying extensively about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. This government simply cannot be trusted. They are lying about fighting a war on drugs, even though they are the largest controller of drugs shelters are protected, but they're not telling the American people that they need to be protected.
And they're
So
spending
I
on.
think it's very important that we take off the blinders, understand that this is a serious war situation coming. We have sufficient time to prepare. It doesn't take a lot of money. If you do it yourself and learn the skills to do it, and I think you need to for privacy's sake, one of the things that you face in today's world is that you let it be nosed around that you're going to have a fallout shelter, and I don't even call them that. I would build as a secure room or a safe room or as a vault room, something that you don't want to be ever using the term bomb shelter because of the way in which your neighbors or other people might think about this.
Right.
It's sad to say that because of the lack of preparedness that most people will be in when these things come down, one of the most difficult instances, is safeguarding yourself and your supplies from hordes of people who will try to invade your residence to strip that residence of anything useful. I think social unrest will be a serious problem in the United States, especially around the destruction areas, but later on that will fan out into any areas where there is food and other supplies ready to be pillaged. You've got to remember that when you have a nuclear preemptive strike in the United States, that nothing will be operating afterwards, at least long distance. There'll be no transportation system. There'll be no electrical system. This nuclear preemptive strike will be preceded by an electromagnetic pulse, several of them over the United States, that will take down the electrical grid. So, the international and interstate commerce system will collapse and people will simply have to become self-sufficient. Now, many farmers and people and ranchers in rural Montana will do fine, although I might say, as a caveat there, that a lot of farmers buy everything in the store anymore and they don't even raise a garden, which is very short-sighted. But they do have the capability, if they had stockpiled any seeds at all, to start a garden, and that's one of the things that I recommend in my storage pamphlets for people that they should do. There's a little pamphlet I've got, it's only $5, called 10 Packs for Survival, which covers the 10 major areas of stockpiling and barter items that people ought to compile to be prepared for any major crisis where you face a cutoff of supplies. In terms of the shelter system that I talked about, there is an architectural manual that I designed and published that's called How to Implement a High Security Shelter in the Home. And this book has all of the plans to do one of these concrete block shelters, and it talks about how to do the filtration system and the electrical system, the batteries, and solar panels to keep these things lit, as well as put high security doors and even build concealed cupboards over the doors so that you can have privacy in a shelter. All of these books and these small pamphlets are available from my publisher, which is Swift Publishing, and they have an 800 number if people want to note that.
Sure.
1-800-644-1057.
Can they get this information on your website?
Yes, it's also on my website,
So-
which is www.joelskousen.com, which I think you have a link to on the screen, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yes. So they can find this information. I also have a larger book called The Secure Home, which is a big 700-page book, about the size of a telephone book, that covers everything from A to Z on high security construction or remodeling of a home, as well as self-sufficiency. So I cover generators, solar panels, battery systems, and water and wind power, all of those things that a ranch or farm or even a suburban residence needs to be safe.
So how long a store of food should people put together?
Well, I recommend at least a 6-month supply of the things that they normally eat, canned goods particularly, the things that they like to, the dry goods. I especially recommend a 6 months to a year supply of the household goods that aren't easily manufactured, light bulbs, soap. You can imagine trying, when there isn't any commerce happening in the United
water as well.
That's right. Of course, water and food are essential. In Montana, depending on where you are, you may or may not have access to streams. You should have a good water purifying system. There are some manual filters like the Berkeley water system. There are oxygenated drops. These are the best kind of liquid water purifiers. I don't recommend chlorine bleach. It's really quite toxic depending on how you use it, and it has a very bad taste. But there are many oxygen-based liquid purifiers. You put a few drops in water and it floods it with oxygen and purifies it.
Uh-huh.
The nice thing about the oxygen-based purifiers, like Aerobic 7 in Phoenix, Arizona, is that you can put it in strong doses, a glass of water, like 20 drops, and drink it down. It will cure dysentery in your system.
Right.
I use it whenever I travel to Mexico or other third world countries as well.
I've used it, and it actually oxygenates the bloodstream.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. And
Right.
oxygen is a very good purifier even when you're ill, so it has excellent uses that way. So pure water is very important, and I believe that in addition to the 6-month supply of things you normally like to eat, you ought to get a long-term supply, 1 to 2 years of wheat, rice, and beans. The reason I say that is that we're looking at a potential famine of that long.
Right.
And it's very important, as I mentioned before, to stockpile some of these non-hybrid seeds so that you can learn to plant your own garden in the first growing season that's available.
So they can get this information and more off of www.joelskousen, that's SKOUSEN.com. And the Secure Home, you authored a book called The Secure Home, and that can be gotten from off your website and Swift Publishing as well, correct?
That's right. Swift Publishing is the one who has those books in stockpile, so you can call the 800 number, which is on the website as well.
Okay.
If they don't have access to the internet, that is 800-644-1057.
So you would think, even looking at world events, say a bomb doesn't fall on your house. There's common sense right now that things aren't going to go on the way they are forever. So as a man with a family, you would advise a man with a family to protect his family, to watch out for his family, to be a father and a man. You would watch out for them, and that would be to start doing some of these things, correct?
Well, it is, and depending on what type of background they have, if you are a manual laborer and have access to tools, you're going to fare a lot better than a professional person
Right.
who's in the highly specialized field that is dependent on the modern economy. I mean, it's going to go back to a third world rural economy for a couple of years, in my estimation. Now, I'm not, you must not believe the propaganda of the anti-war movement, which states that a nuclear war is simply going to create a nuclear winter that's going to kill everyone. So why prepare? That isn't true at all. When you look at Hiroshima and any other nuclear event that's happened, people survived after that. Most people survived, unless they were in the blast zone themselves. So you won't die. You may wish you were dead, depending on the level of fallout radiation sickness. I mean, radiation sickness is a very potent and terrible disease to have because, it's like your cells get shot full of millions of holes from miniature bullets and they start to leak out all over the place.
Wow.
And so things don't operate. Now, if you can slow down the rate of fallout, your body can absorb this somewhat and repair over a period of time. That's why sheltering is essential.
Is there a way to slow down that process? Is there a medication that people should stockpile?
No. You do not want, the worst thing you want to do is start taking a lot of antibiotics. The medical establishment medical system has no way of helping people in a nuclear fallout situation.
What about
And worse yet, hospitals and doctors aren't protected themselves, so they're going to be sick like everyone else. You need to prepare with natural, holistic medicines, herbs and vitamins. You need to build up your immune system. You need to be able to start to, you need to eat healthy. That's your best chance of rebuilding, is to
go back to nature?
go back to nature.
Right.
You need to stockpile garlic and other types of good herbs that can, help ward off a lot of the poisons and the toxins that will come
So and this information is on your website as well?
Yes, there's a lot of that, and it's also in my book, Strategic, or The Secure Home.
The Secure Home?
Yes, now, of course, it isn't a complete course in holistic and natural health. In Montana, there are many, many sources for that at your local health food stores.
Sure.
And elsewhere on the internet. It's too broad of a field. One of the best sources over the internet is herbalhealeracademy.com, which has tremendous supply of these things, plus information books, and it's like a one-stop shopping center for the best of the herbal healing philosophies.
So,
and there are others too, but that's a good place to start.
There's a lot of people moving to Montana just for this, just for the reasons we're talking about. You are set up for consultation. You actually do consultation on these matters, on secure homes and all these things.
I do. I worked for 30 years as a high security architect, designing high security homes and helping people relocate around the United States and North America. And I'm retired from that now. My permanent work now is as editor of the World Affairs Brief, which tries to warn people about what's coming and gives people a weekly news analysis of what I think the government is up to, and to try to alert them to the things that the mainstream media will not tell them about what's really going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, and what the ulterior motives of our globalist government leaders have. If anyone's interested in the World Affairs Brief, they can also find that on my website as well. And it comes every week by email. So I do consult. I don't design homes for people anymore, but I do consult, and through my books they're able to take stock plans or even architectural drawn plans or even do-it-yourself drawn plans. And I can help them rearrange those to make sure that they get a good design in that implements a shelter and provides some type of concealed entry. In my high security rooms that I used to design, I would always make sure there was an alternate exit as well, so that you don't get trapped inside one of these things. If the house comes down around it, that you have some other way of getting out.
Right, alternative exit.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And you have to know, how to deal with the building department. You don't want everybody and their dog knowing that you have a high security shelter. So there are ways to design this and present plans to the building department so that it looks like an ordinary storage room, and later on then you can come in and convert it to a fully operating high security room with the concealed entrances, etc.
And what you were saying earlier, can these dwellings be cost effective?
Well, this obviously is cost over and above what you will put into a normal house. Now,
right.
One of the things that I recommend against in my books is that you don't want to get into the type of housing that brings undue attention to itself. The most difficult situation to deal with is a home that's completely underground with bunker and type aspects with fields of fire and metal plates covering things with shooting aspects of a home. You really leave yourself open to be a target if you set your home up like a fortress.
By the government.
It's really much wiser to have a normal appearing home with basement space in it that is high security, so that no one need know that you have what you have, so that your home is not a target. So you want a low profile thing. I also recommend, even though there are many benefits of having certain types of homes like dome homes and concrete domes, it's very difficult to find buyers for those if you need to resell or need to move. Log cabins are much better in terms of resale value if you want something rural, but you have to be careful of certain types of rural technology that has no resale value.
Right. Well, Joel, we're getting short on time here in the studio. We got to wrap things up for this evening. You've been very informative over the last 2 weeks. And what I would like to do is that we have a lot coming up on us. It's an election year. And you ran so much stuff down to us last week. And in your World Affairs Brief, I'm sure you do the same thing. But Can we have you back in a few months to kind of see how the election's going, and could we get some information from you in a couple months on?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, David.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being available to us. I know that you're on the road actually tonight traveling.
Yes.
And thank you so much for being with us. Is there anything else you'd want to add to the conversation before we part ways?
Well, just remember that, we're not alone in this world. There is divine help and assistance for those that listen to conscience, and that's what I want to recommend, that people live a providential life, be wise and cautious in what they do, and I think they'll be guided in how to best prepare.
Amen. Thank you again, Joel.
My pleasure, David. Good night.
Safe traveling.